The crystal chandelier above table 7 had witnessed 1,000 meals, 1,000 conversations, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold on this particular Tuesday evening in Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, Le Jardin d'Or. The light refracted through its 1,000 prisms, casting dancing shadows across white tablecloths that cost more to launder than most people earned in a day. Maya Chen moved through these shadows with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to become invisible. Her black uniform perfectly pressed, her dark hair pulled back in a flawless bun, her hands steady as she balanced a tray of champagne flutes that sparkled like liquid starlight. She had been working at Le Jardin d'Or for 8 months now, ever since her world had collapsed in on itself like a dying star. 8 months of smiling at people who looked through her as if she were made of glass. 8 months of serving courses that cost more than her monthly rent in the cramped studio apartment she shared with 2 other women in Queens. 8 months of swallowing her pride along with the bitter taste of failure. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of the prestigious Ashford Tower, a steel and glass monument to wealth that pierced the Manhattan skyline like a needle stitching the earth to the heavens. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered with 1,000,000 promises, each light a dream, each dream belonging to someone else now. Maya used to have dreams that were bright. She used to be someone who made things happen, who commanded boardrooms, who spoke 5 languages and negotiated deals worth millions. That was before everything fell apart. Before her father's business empire crumbled. Before the accusations. Before the shame that followed her like a second shadow. Now she was just a waitress. Just another invisible woman in a city full of them. If you're enjoying this story of courage and redemption, please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us bring you more incredible true stories like Maya's. Maya, table 7 needs attention, whispered Marcus, the head waiter, as he swept past her with the efficiency of a man who had orchestrated 1,000 perfect evenings. Marcus was in his 50s, with silver hair and kind eyes that had seen every type of customer humanity had to offer. He had been working at Le Jardin d'Or for 20 years, and he moved through the restaurant like a conductor leading an orchestra, each gesture precise, each word measured. Maya nodded, setting down her tray at the service station and smoothing her apron. Table 7. The power table. The table is reserved for Manhattan's elite, for the dealmakers and kingmakers, for those who shaped the world with their signatures and their bank accounts. Tonight, table 7 belonged to Vincent Wu. She had recognized him the moment he walked in, of course. Everyone in the restaurant had. Vincent Wu was impossible not to recognize. His face graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. She had recognized him the moment he walked in, of course. Everyone in the restaurant had. Vincent Wu was impossible not to recognize. At 42, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the tech industry, the CEO and founder of Tech Vision Industries, a company that had revolutionized artificial intelligence and machine learning. His black hair was swept back from a face that magazines called striking, sharp cheekbones, intense dark eyes, a mouth that rarely smiled in photographs. He sat at table 7 with 3 other men, all of them in expensive suits, all of them leaning in as Vincent spoke in low, urgent tones. The air around their table crackled with the electricity of important business being conducted, of decisions being made that would ripple out and touch lives across the globe. Maya approached with her server's smile, pleasant, professional, forgettable. "Good evening, gentlemen. May I offer you something to drink while you review the menu?" Vincent Wu didn't even look up. His attention remained fixed on the tablet in front of him, his fingers scrolling through what appeared to be financial documents. The other men glanced at her briefly before returning their focus to their phones and papers. "Champagne," one of them said curtly. "The Cristal. Excellent choice, sir. I'll bring that right away." She turned to leave, but Vincent Wu's voice stopped her. Not because he addressed her, he didn't, but because of what he said and how he said it. He was speaking in Mandarin, his voice low but carrying in the acoustically perfect restaurant. The words flowed from him with the casual cruelty of someone who believed himself completely insulated from consequence, someone who had spent so long in rooms where everyone spoke English that he had forgotten, or perhaps never learned, that the world was larger than his assumptions. "These people are idiots," he said in Mandarin, his tone dripping with contempt. They don't understand anything about technology. They're just here because they want to feel important, to be close to success. Look at them, nodding like they comprehend a single word I'm saying about neural network architecture. Maya's hand tightened imperceptibly on her notepad. She kept walking, her face a perfect mask of professional neutrality. Behind her, Vincent continued, apparently emboldened by the certainty that no one understood him. And this restaurant, overpriced garbage. The foie gras last time tasted like cardboard. But this is where deals get made in New York, so here we sit, pretending that mediocre French food is somehow special. At least the waitresses are trained to be invisible. That's something. One of the other men responded in English. The champagne here is excellent, though. And Vincent, about the Shanghai expansion. Vincent switched back to English seamlessly. We'll discuss that after dinner. First, I want to hear your projections for Q4. Maya reached the service station, her hands steady as she prepared the champagne service, but her mind was racing. The temperature of her skin felt wrong, too hot and too cold at the same time. She knew that voice. Not personally, but she knew the type. The arrogance of someone who had never been told no, never been denied, never had to consider that the people serving him might have thoughts, feelings, histories, languages of their own. She had grown up speaking Mandarin. Her father, Chen had insisted that she and her brother master it alongside English. Language is power, he used to say, sitting at their dinner table in their house in Connecticut, back when they had a house, back when they had a table that wasn't bought secondhand. To speak someone's language is to understand their heart. Her father, the thought of him sent a sharp pain through her chest. Chen Wei, who had built a shipping empire from nothing, who had come to America with $200 and a dream, who had worked 20-hour days to give his children everything he never had. Chen Wei, who was now in federal prison, convicted of fraud and embezzlement, his reputation destroyed, his name synonymous with scandal. Except he hadn't done it. Maya knew he hadn't done it. She had seen the evidence, the real evidence that the prosecutors had conveniently ignored. She had watched as her father's business partner, Raymond Zhao, had testified against him, had painted him as the mastermind of a scheme that Raymond himself had orchestrated. She had sat in that courtroom every day for 3 months, watching justice fail, watching truth drown beneath the weight of lies told by men in expensive suits. Men like Vincent Wu. She loaded the champagne flutes onto her tray with mechanical precision. The crystal glowed golden in the soft light, each bubble a tiny universe rising and dying. $300 per bottle. 4 bottles for table 7. $1,200 for champagne that would be consumed in an hour, while her father sat in a prison cell, counting the days until a parole hearing that might never come. You all right, Maya? It was Jasmine, another server, touching her arm gently. Jasmine was 23, working her way through nursing school, her dark skin glowing even under the harsh service station lights. She had a smile that could melt glaciers and a laugh that made everyone around her feel lighter. She was one of the few people at the restaurant who had bothered to learn Maya's name, to ask about her life, to treat her like a human being rather than a function. I'm fine, Maya said automatically. You sure? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maya forced a smile. Just a long day. I'm good. But she wasn't good. As she carried the champagne back toward table 7, she felt something shifting inside her, some tectonic plate of her carefully controlled emotions beginning to move. For 8 months she had been silent. For 8 months, she had swallowed her rage and her grief and her sense of injustice. For 8 months, she had made herself small and invisible and forgettable. Maybe tonight, she was tired of being invisible. She reached table 7 and began to serve the champagne with practiced elegance, starting with the guest to Vincent's right, moving clockwise around the table. The men barely acknowledged her presence, too absorbed in their conversation about market projections and stockholder expectations and the future of artificial intelligence. As she poured Vincent's glass, he made an irritated gesture with his hand, not quite pushing her away but making his displeasure clear. She had poured too slowly, apparently, or perhaps he was simply annoyed by the reminder that he was dependent on other people for even such small services. Faster, he snapped in English. Then, in Mandarin, muttering under his breath but loud enough for her to hear clearly. These waitresses, incompetent. Why does this restaurant hire people who can barely do their jobs? She moves like a turtle. Look at her hands shaking. Pathetic. This is why automation will replace all of them soon. Good riddance to this unskilled labor. The champagne flute in Maya's hand didn't shake. Her hands never shook, no matter what storms raged inside her. That was something her father had taught her too. Control, he would say. Always maintain control. The world will try to shake you. Don't let it. She finished pouring, set the bottle in the ice bucket beside the table and straightened up. The restaurant hummed around her with the soft sounds of cutlery against china, of murmured conversations, of a piano playing something classical in the corner. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered with indifferent beauty. Vincent was still talking, his voice low and harsh in Mandarin. I should complain to the manager. Service this poor is unacceptable. When I buy this building next month, I'll make sure they replace half the staff. Starting with the incompetent ones like this girl. Something inside Maya snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically. More like the sound of ice cracking on a frozen lake. A sound so quiet you might not hear it until you're already falling through. She leaned down slightly, her voice perfectly polite, perfectly professional, and spoke in Mandarin. Each word crisp and clear and deliberate. Sir, she said, I sincerely apologize if my service has not met your expectations. Perhaps if you spent less time insulting the staff and more time actually reading the menu you're holding upside down, you might enjoy your evening more. Also, the foie gras you complained about? We don't serve foie gras. We never have. You're thinking of La Bernardine. And for your information, TechVision stock is down 12% this quarter. So perhaps your time would be better spent fixing your company's problems rather than creating imaginary ones about waitresses whose hands, I assure you, don't shake. The silence that fell over table 7 was absolute. It spread outward like a shock wave, catching nearby tables in its wake. Vincent Wu's head snapped up, his eyes finally focusing on her face. Those eyes, dark, intelligent, ruthless, widened with an emotion she couldn't quite name. Shock, certainly. Anger, probably. But something else, too. Something that looked almost like recognition, though they had never met. His face went through a series of rapid transformations. Red flooded into his cheeks, then drained away, leaving him pale. His mouth opened, then closed. The other men at the table stared between Vincent and Maya with expressions of confused alarm, understanding that something significant had just happened, but not comprehending what. You speak Mandarin, Vincent finally said. Still in Mandarin, his voice strangled. Fluently, Maya replied in the same language, her tone now ice-cold. Alongside English, French, Spanish, and Japanese. 5 languages. I also have an MBA from Columbia, a degree in international business from Georgetown, and 3 years of experience negotiating multimillion-dollar contracts. But yes, currently I'm a waitress, which doesn't make me stupid, incompetent, or unworthy of basic human respect. She switched to English, her voice carrying now, clear and strong. Your champagne is served, Mr. Wu. The chef recommends the lamb tonight. I'll give you a few moments to decide. She turned and walked away, her head high, her step steady. Behind her, the silence at table 7 stretched and stretched. She could feel eyes on her from all over the restaurant. She could feel Marcus's stare burning into her back. She could feel her heart hammering against her ribs like a prisoner demanding release. What had she just done? She reached the service station and stood there, her hands finally beginning to shake now that no one could see them. Jasmine appeared beside her, eyes wide. Maya, she whispered urgently. Girl, what just happened? Vincent Wu looks like he's been struck by lightning. I quit, Maya said, the words tumbling out before she had fully formed the decision. I'm quitting. I can't do this anymore. Do what? Be invisible. Be silent. Be nothing. Marcus materialized, his face grave. Maya, my office. Now. She followed him through the kitchen, past line cooks who looked up from their stations with curious expressions, past the pastry chef who was putting finishing touches on something that looked like edible art. Marcus's office was small, cramped, filled with schedules and invoices and the accumulated paperwork of running one of New York's finest restaurants. He closed the door and turned to face her. She braced herself for the firing, for the lecture, for the end of this chapter of her diminished life. But Marcus's expression wasn't angry. It was thoughtful. "That was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've seen in 20 years, he said quietly. "Possibly both." "I'm sorry," Maya said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "You've been kind to me, Marcus. You didn't deserve that scene. What I deserve is irrelevant. The question is, what happens now?" He leaned against his desk, studying her. "Vincent Wu is one of our most important clients. He brings business associates here 3 times a week. He's also temperamental, demanding, and as of about 5 minutes ago, very publicly humiliated. Then I'll leave now. You can tell him I was fired immediately. I won't cause you any more trouble." Marcus held up a hand. "I'm not finished. He's all of those things, yes, but he's also smart, very smart, and he doesn't respect weakness." He paused. "What you did out there, standing up for yourself, calling him on his behavior, that took courage. The question is, why now? Why after 8 months of being the perfect, invisible employee?" Maya was silent for a long moment. Through the closed door, she could hear the muffled sounds of the restaurant, the symphony of an evening service in full swing. She thought about her answer, about how much truth to share. "My father is in prison," she finally said. "He was convicted of crimes he didn't commit, by men who lied with the same casual certainty that Vincent Wu used when he insulted me. I've spent 8 months being small, being quiet, trying to disappear from a world that already made me disappear once. And tonight, listening to that man treat me like I was nothing, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't be nothing anymore." Marcus nodded slowly. "Chen Wei, I thought I recognized your name when you applied. I followed the trial." Maya's eyes widened. "You knew? This whole time, you knew who I was." "I know who you are. Past tense, present tense, they're not the same thing, Maya. Who you were was the daughter of a man accused of crimes. Who you are is a woman who works hard, treats her colleagues with respect, and doesn't let entitled billionaires push her around." He smiled slightly. "Even if it costs her job." "Is it? Is it costing me my job?" "That depends. Do you want to keep it?" She blinked, surprised. Yes. Actually, yes. Despite everything, I need this job. I'm trying to save money for a lawyer, for my father's appeal. And working here, at least I know I'm good at something, even if it's just carrying plates." "It's not just carrying plates," Marcus said gently. "It's grace under pressure. It's maintaining dignity in difficult circumstances. It's the ability to read people, to anticipate their needs, to create an experience that transcends the food on the plate. Those are valuable skills, Maya. Don't diminish them just because the world has diminished you." There was a sharp knock on the door. Before Marcus could respond, it opened, and one of the floor managers stuck his head in, face flushed. "Marcus, Table 7 wants to speak with you. Immediately. Vincent Wu specifically requested you come alone." Marcus and Maya exchanged glances. "Wait here," he told her. "Don't leave. Not yet." He left, closing the door behind him. Maya sank into the chair across from his desk, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was draining away, leaving behind the cold reality of what she had done. She had publicly embarrassed one of the city's most powerful men. She had broken every rule of service industry professionalism. She had let her anger, her grief, her sense of injustice overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. And it had felt incredible. For the first time in 8 months, maybe for the first time in years, she had felt like herself. Not the diminished, desperate version of herself that she had become, but the woman she used to be. The woman who didn't accept injustice quietly. The woman who spoke 5 languages and held an MBA and negotiated million-dollar deals. The woman her father had raised her to be. Through the small window in Marcus's office, She could see a sliver of the restaurant. Table 7 was visible, Vincent Wu's profile sharp against the warm lighting. He was speaking intently to Marcus, his hands moving in emphatic gestures. The other men at the table looked uncomfortable, like they wanted to be anywhere else. Maya closed her eyes and allowed herself to remember. Not the trial, not the conviction, not the day they took her father away in handcuffs. Further back, better memories. Her father's study, lined with books in English, Mandarin, and Cantonese. The smell of jasmine tea and old paper. Her father at his desk, teaching her calligraphy, his brush moving with steady confidence across rice paper. Every stroke matters, Maya, he would say. Every line is a choice. Make your choices with intention. She had tried to live by that. Even now, serving tables and counting tips, she tried to make every choice with intention. But tonight's choice had been different. Tonight's choice had been made from anger, from pain, from 8 months of accumulated grief bursting through her carefully constructed dam. The door opened again. Marcus stepped in, his expression unreadable. "Well," he said quietly, "you've certainly made an impression." Maya stood up, squaring her shoulders. "Just tell me, am I fired?" "No," Marcus said, and there was something strange in his voice. "You're not fired. Vincent Wu has made a request, and it's unusual." "What kind of request?" "He wants you to return to table 7. He wants to apologize." The words hung in the air like a question, impossible and improbable. Maya stared at Marcus, certain she had misheard. "He wants to what?" "Apologize. To you, personally, in front of his business associates." Marcus shook his head slightly, as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. "In my 20 years here, I have never seen Vincent Wu apologize to anyone for anything. But he's insisting. He won't continue with his dinner unless you come back to the table." Maya's mind raced. This had to be some kind of trap, some elaborate setup to humiliate her further. Men like Vincent Wu didn't apologize to waitresses. They didn't apologize to anyone. They moved through the world taking what they wanted, saying what they pleased, secure in the knowledge that their wealth and power insulated them from consequence. "I don't understand," she said slowly. "Neither do I," Marcus admitted. "But I do know this, whatever happens next, you have a choice. You can walk out right now, and I'll support that decision. Or you can go back out there and see what he has to say. Either way, you're not fired. You have my word on that." Maya thought about her father sitting in his cell. She thought about the months of silence, of making herself small, of swallowing every injustice because she had no other choice. She thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who never backed down from a challenge, who faced difficult situations with courage rather than retreat. "I'll go," she said. "But Marcus? Whatever he says, whatever happens, I'm not apologizing for telling the truth." Marcus smiled, and it was warm and genuine. "Good. Because the truth is the only thing worth defending, Maya. Your father taught you that, I think." This story gets even more remarkable. But first, if you appreciate the time and effort that goes into researching these stories, please hit that share button so others can experience Maya's journey too. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Then she straightened her uniform, checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door, and stepped back out into the restaurant. The walk to table 7 felt like walking underwater, every step slow and weighted. The other servers watched her pass with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Jasmine gave her a small, encouraging nod. The piano music continued, something by Debussy now, gentle and flowing. Vincent Wu stood as she approached the table. The gesture was so unexpected that she almost stopped walking. The other men at the table looked equally surprised, scrambling to their feet a beat later, clearly unsure of protocol. Up close, Maya could see details she had missed before. The fine lines at the corners of Vincent's eyes, suggesting sleepless nights and constant stress. The slight tremor in his hands, quickly controlled. The expensive watch on his wrist, its face blank and dark, not because it was broken, but because it was one of those minimalist designs that cost tens of thousands of dollars while telling you nothing useful. "Miss Chen," he said in English, his voice formal and carefully controlled. "Thank you for returning. Please, will you give me a moment of your time?" The morning after the incident at Le Jardin d'Or, Maya woke at 5:30 a.m. to the sound of her phone alarm cutting through the darkness of her shared studio apartment. The room was dim, lit only by the pale gray light seeping through the thin curtains. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling, watching the patterns of shadow shift as early morning traffic moved past on the street below. Beside her, separated only by a curtain hung on a tension rod, she could hear the steady breathing of her roommate, Isabel, a graphic designer who worked night shifts and had only gone to bed 2 hours ago. Maya's body ached with the particular exhaustion that comes not from physical labor but from emotional expenditure. Every muscle felt heavy, like she had been carrying something impossibly weighty for too long and had only just set it down. The memory of last night crashed over her in waves. Vincent Wu's face as she spoke to him in Mandarin, the silence that had fallen across the restaurant, the impossible apology that had followed. She forced herself to sit up, her feet finding the cold floor. The apartment was tiny, barely 400 square feet, divided between 3 women: Maya, Isabel, and their other roommate, Keiko, a journalism student who was already gone for an early shift at her internship. They each had a section of the room: a bed, a small dresser, a few cubic feet of personal space in a city that charged premium prices for every inch. This was not where Maya had imagined herself at 31 years old. 3 years ago, before everything collapsed, she had been living in a spacious Tribeca loft. That life felt like a dream now. She moved quietly through her morning routine, careful not to wake Isabel. Shower in the shared bathroom down the hall, where the water pressure was weak and the temperature unreliable. Coffee made on the hot plate they kept on the windowsill because their lease technically didn't allow cooking appliances, but the landlord looked the other way as long as the rent was paid on time. Toast with peanut butter, eaten standing at the window, watching the city wake up. From 6 stories above Queens Boulevard, she could see the world stirring to life. Delivery trucks rumbling past. The bodega on the corner opened its security gates. A woman in scrubs waiting at the bus stop, probably heading to an early hospital shift. Regular people living regular lives. People who had never flown first class or negotiated million-dollar deals or attended galas where champagne flowed like water. People like her now. Maya's phone buzzed on the windowsill beside her coffee mug. A text from Jasmine: "Girl, you're famous. The staff group chat is exploding. Everyone's talking about last night. Are you okay?" She typed back, "I'm fine. See you tonight." "Absolutely. We need to talk. Also, Marcus wants to see you when you come in. But don't worry. I think it's good news." Maya set down her phone, her heart rate picking up slightly. Good news. What constituted good news in her current life? Not getting fired was good news. Getting an extra shift was good news. Finding a $20 bill in a coat pocket was good news. Her life had become so small. She finished her coffee and dressed for her day shift at a different restaurant. A busy diner in Midtown where she picked up lunch hours 3 times a week. The diner was nothing like Le Jardin d'Or. No crystal chandeliers, no $300 champagne, no billionaires making deals at power tables. Just endless cups of coffee, endless orders of eggs and pancakes, endless streams of tourists and office workers and exhausted parents with sticky children. But the tips were good, and the manager didn't ask questions about her past, and the other servers treated her with casual friendliness. It was honest work, her father would have said. There was dignity in all honest work. The subway ride into Manhattan was crowded, bodies pressed together in that particular intimacy of public transportation. Everyone carefully not making eye contact. Everyone lost in their phones or their thoughts or their exhaustion. Maya stood near the door, one hand on the pole, letting the rhythm of the train lull her into a kind of meditation. She thought about Vincent Wu's apology, replaying it in her mind. "Miss Chen," he had said, standing at table 7 while the entire restaurant watched in fascinated silence. "I owe you an apology. What I said was inexcusable. I have no defense except arrogance and the foolish assumption that my words existed in a vacuum, that they had no impact beyond my own private thoughts. But words are never private, not really. They reveal character, and what I revealed about my character was disappointing. He had paused then, and Maya had seen something in his face that surprised her. Genuine shame. Not the performative regret of someone caught doing wrong, but the authentic discomfort of someone confronting an unpleasant truth about themselves. You were right to call me on it, he continued. I was holding the menu upside down. I was confusing restaurants. And I was being cruel for no reason except that I could be, because I thought there would be no consequences. That's the worst kind of cruelty, the casual kind, the kind that comes from not seeing other people as fully human. He had switched to Mandarin then, his voice softer. My mother was a waitress when she first came to this country. She worked 3 jobs to put me through school. I should know better. I do know better. I'm sorry. The other men at the table had stared at him in shock. One of them had actually pulled out his phone, as if to document this unprecedented moment. Maya had stood there, carefully composed, years of business training keeping her face neutral while her mind raced. This was not how the evening was supposed to end. Billionaires didn't apologize to waitresses. They didn't acknowledge mistakes. They certainly didn't invoke their mother's struggles to emphasize their own moral failures. I accept your apology, Mr. Wu, she had said finally, in English, her voice steady. Thank you for your honesty. He nodded, relief washing visibly across his features. Please, continue with your service. We won't take any more of your time. But as she had turned to leave, he had added one more thing, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Your father's case. I read about it. I know Raymond Zhao. I've done business with him. And I don't believe your father was guilty. Those words had followed Maya home last night. They had kept her awake, turning over and over in her mind like stones worn smooth by water. They echoed now as the subway screeched to a stop at Times Square, and she pushed her way out onto the platform. I don't believe your father was guilty. 10 words. Just 10 words from a stranger. But they meant something. They meant she wasn't crazy. They meant someone else saw what she saw, understood what she understood. They meant that maybe, possibly, there was still hope. The diner shift was brutal. 12 tables in her section, a constant stream of orders, a kitchen that was running behind, and a new busboy who kept forgetting to refill the water glasses. Maya moved through it all on autopilot, her body remembering the choreography even when her mind was elsewhere. Coffee, black, wheat toast, scrambled eggs soft. 2 short stacks, extra butter, and a side of bacon crispy. Cheeseburger medium, fries, chocolate shake. Order after order, table after table, hour after hour. Her feet ached in her sensible shoes. Her lower back sent up warning flares of pain. But she kept moving, kept smiling, kept asking if everything was to their satisfaction. During her 15-minute break, she sat in the alley behind the diner, her back against the brick wall, and called the federal prison where her father was incarcerated. The phone system was automated and impersonal. Press 1 to schedule a visit. Press 2 to add funds to an inmate account. Press 3 to. She pressed 1. An electronic voice informed her that the next available visiting slot was in 3 weeks. 3 weeks. 21 days before she could see her father's face, hold his hands across a table in a room filled with other families and other desperate conversations. She scheduled the appointment and hung up, her chest tight with frustrated love. Chen Wei, her father, the man who had taught her to ride a bike and to negotiate contracts, who had made her practice her Mandarin until she could recite poetry and debate philosophy, who had attended every school play and every piano recital, who had believed in her absolutely and completely. He had been in prison for 2 years now. 24 months. 730 days since the conviction. The trial itself had lasted 3 months before that, and Maya had spent the first year afterward in shock, barely functioning. Then, 8 months ago, she had finally pulled herself together enough to start working at Le Jardin d'Or, determined to save money for his appeal. She could measure his imprisonment in visits, 26 so far, each one more heartbreaking than the last. She could measure it in letters, in phone calls, in the slow erosion of his spirit that she witnessed every time she saw him. Chen Wei had been a force of nature before the conviction. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a laugh that filled rooms and a presence that commanded attention. He had built Chen Maritime Logistics from a single shipping container to a fleet of vessels, from one office in Chinatown to locations in 12 countries. He had employed hundreds of people, moved millions of tons of cargo, and connected markets across oceans. Raymond Zhao had been his partner, his trusted friend, the man who stood beside him at the company's founding, who toasted with him at celebrations, who called him brother. And Raymond Zhao had betrayed him completely. Maya still didn't understand all the details of the fraud scheme. It involved shell companies and falsified invoices, cargo that existed on paper but not in reality, insurance claims for losses that never occurred. Millions of dollars had been siphoned from the company accounts, moved through a labyrinth of offshore holdings, lost in the kind of financial maze that only experts could navigate. When it was discovered, Raymond had blamed Chen Wei, had produced emails that seemed to show Chen Wei authorizing the fraudulent transactions, had testified, tears in his eyes, about how his dear friend had changed, become greedy, involved him unknowingly in illegal schemes. The prosecutor had called it a betrayal of epic proportions. The judge had called it a calculated fraud that destroyed lives and livelihoods. The jury had called it guilty on all counts. But Maya knew the truth. She had worked in that company. She had seen how decisions were made, how documents were processed. Those emails were forged. Those signatures were faked. Raymond had planned it perfectly, had made her father the scapegoat while he walked away free, taking his share of the stolen money and starting a new company, a new life. No one believed her. The evidence was too compelling, the story too neat, and Maya was just the loyal daughter, unable to accept her father's guilt. Except Vincent Wu believed her, or at least he had doubts. And Vincent Wu had resources, connections, and influence. Maya's phone buzzed. Another text from Jasmine. Marcus is asking about you again. When do you finish your other shift? 4 p.m. I'll be at Le Jardin by 5:30 for setup. Perfect. Girl, something is going on. Marcus has been on the phone all day and he looks excited? I've never seen Marcus excited. He's always so calm. But today he's different. Maya finished her break and went back inside, diving back into the endless demands of the lunch rush. But her mind was elsewhere, turning over possibilities, running through scenarios. What if Vincent Wu really could help? What if he knew something about Raymond Zhao, had information that could prove her father's innocence? What if last night's confrontation had somehow, impossibly, opened a door that had seemed permanently closed? She thought about her father's last letter, which had arrived 3 days ago. He wrote to her every week, long letters in his beautiful calligraphy, mixing English and Chinese characters, filling pages with his thoughts, his memories, his endless attempts to stay hopeful. My dear Maya, the most recent letter began. I have been thinking about the summer when you were 12, when I taught you to sail on Long Island Sound. Do you remember? You were so determined to do everything yourself, to need no help. And when the boom swung around, you ducked perfectly, already learning to anticipate the wind. You were fearless then, and you're fearless now. Never lose that courage, my daughter. She had cried reading those words, sitting on her narrow bed with the letter pressed to her chest. Maya's hands trembled as she poured Vincent Wu's coffee at their 4th meeting. Not at Le Jardin d'Or this time, but in his corner office overlooking Central Park. 3 weeks had passed since that confrontational Tuesday evening. 3 weeks of careful conversations and cautious revelations. I found something, Vincent said, sliding a folder across his desk. Raymond Zhao's new company. He's using the same shell company structure, the same offshore accounts. I had my forensic accountants trace the money. Maya's breath caught. Inside the folder were documents, bank transfers, email trails, corporate filings, evidence, real evidence. This proves my father was framed? It proves Raymond is still running the same schemes, which means he was likely running them before. Combined with testimony from some of his former employees who are willing to talk now, Vincent paused. I've already contacted a law firm that specializes in wrongful convictions. They're reviewing the case pro bono. Maya sank into the leather chair across from him, the folder clutched to her chest. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You don't know my father. Vincent was quiet for a moment, gazing out at the sprawling park below. Because you reminded me who I was supposed to be. My mother didn't work 3 jobs, so I could become the kind of man who treats people like they're invisible. And because... He turned back to her. Sometimes the universe puts someone in your path who tells you the truth you need to hear, even when you don't want to hear it. 6 months later, Maya stood in a different courtroom. This time, she watched as the judge reviewed the new evidence. As Raymond Zhao's face paled, as the prosecutor recommended overturning Chen Wei's conviction. When her father walked out of prison that afternoon, blinking in the sunlight, Maya ran to him. He held her tight, and she felt him shaking with sobs he'd held back for 2 years. You never gave up? He whispered in Mandarin. You taught me not to, she replied. That evening, Maya returned to Le Jardin d'Or, not as a server, but as Vincent Wu's guest at table 7. Marcus served them personally, a knowing smile on his face. Jasmine winked at her from across the room. Vincent raised his champagne glass. To speak up, even when it's terrifying. To being seen. To tell the truth. Maya clinked her glass against his, the crystal singing in the perfect acoustics of the restaurant. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan glittered with a million promises, each light a dream. This time, some of those dreams were hers again. And in her purse, folded carefully, was a job offer from TechVision Industries, Director of International Relations. Vincent had insisted she was overqualified for anything less. Every stroke matters. Her father had taught her. Make your choices with intention. Tonight, Maya had chosen to be visible. And the world, finally, had chosen to see her back. Thank you for watching Maya's incredible story. If it moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things.